And our top story this hour is the rift in the Republican Party over Trump's plot to take your taxpayer money, give it out to thugs and convicts. It's not going well. Acting Attorney General Blanche could not get Senate leaders on board with this going into the weekend. The idea that this would be just one more thing that would happen and people would make some noise, but Trump would get away with it, is evaporating and fading and turning into something that is stretching out into much more of a headache for Republicans, and it may ultimately fail. It might be stopped by Congress or the courts. Either way, it has been a drag on Trump as the summer begins. Blanche was trying to tamp down concerns, but even hardcore Trump loyalists, conservative Republicans, have been piping up. Apparently, while sometimes they gross in private, they give the blind quotes off the record or on background to reporters. We hear about all these anonymous Republican critics. This one is over the line for many. Here was Ted Cruz.
The Republican senators were pissed. People were, the entire meeting, they were screaming at the acting attorney general. And he was trying to lay out the legal basis. And there were multiple senators yelling at the attorney general saying, this feels like self-dealing. This feels like Trump cut a deal with himself.
That's Ted Cruz in the meeting, reporting from the meeting, which is pretty interesting. You might not always want Ted Cruz's podcast to be the first thing you listen to, right? Why he's spending time during his government salary making so much media is a separate question. But if he's telling the truth and not just sort of channeling it for any other political reasons, they're all politicians. But if he's telling the truth and we have other independent accounts of a similar nature, wow, pissed, yelling at the attorney general and saying the thing that Trump critics have been saying for over a decade now, that it's corruption, it's self-dealing, it's self-enrichment, it's an obsession with making money for himself, not public service. I told you there are other accounts that match Ted Cruz's podcast. The Times said it was a 2-hour blow-up where dozens, that would mean more than half the caucus, more than 20 Republican senators vented their anger and were so livid by the end that they just skipped any vote on the immigration bill that was part of Trump's agenda. House Republicans angry, so they have a rift too. And senators are concerned about who's going to get the money. Remember, even the senators and House members who have sometimes downplayed January 6th because that's Trump's demand, they also lived through it. And so giving out money to fund the people who were convicted by juries of their peers for trespassing and assaulting and going into the Congress, which is their place of work, you could see how, even if they are craven political sellouts, how they might think, I don't know that I want to give out money to the convicted criminals who came and had me running in my workplace and were threatening to hang people. I don't know if I like that idea. Now, I always keep it real with you when I report on things. This is a very likely corrupt, illegal deal, by which I mean it is not on the level, and it is likely, if it is tested in courts, to ultimately not be fully legal, to be trimmed or stopped. So that's the most important thing to keep in mind. It's not really about a lawsuit or the IRS or any of that stuff. Those are the cover stories, the lies. They also erected this commission to try to, in a classic sort of political way, get people talking about that it has 5 members, but they could be picked and fired by Trump, that there's no judicial review, yada, yada. But the commission is just one more Washington game. Everybody understands the idea is Trump taking over $1 billion from you, the taxpayer, to give to people that might help him with his next insurrection. It's an unprecedented use of public funds. It's not how the DOJ's judgment fund is supposed to work. That's been widely reported as an abuse of the judgment fund, and its operations could be curtailed. This can't become, for example, a, quote, piggy bank for any incumbent administration, currently Trump, to just finance their favorite causes. That is a sort of elaborate way of saying the obvious. This isn't his money. Congress didn't appropriate it. They are seizing it and testing whether they can get away with it. And everything else is just noise. IRS, settlement, commission. Sometimes there are details in a valid process where experts and lawyers focus on that intently because you say, well, here's the system and here's the standard for review. This isn't that. This is a corrupt seizing of your tax dollars to pay off convicted criminals, including some who were convicted of some of the worst crimes you can imagine, attacking police, trying to assassinate public officials, trying to overthrow our democracy, or if you want to be old school, as it's called in the federal code, sedition against the United States of America. And any other time, that's something that's punished and you go away to prison. In this Trumpian time, that's been rewarded, freed from prison, and now set up for payments that are extracted from you, the taxpayer, if they get away with it. As the old saying goes, Happy Memorial Day. I want to bring in Emily Bazelon from the New York Times and Ankush Kharduri, former federal prosecutor. Ankush, I tried to lay that out clearly. Your views.
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right when you say that, the litigation, the settlement, the commission, they're sort of red herrings. I've gotten a lot of questions about this. How could he settle it? Was the case meritorious? Does it make sense to set up this fund out of it? And it's like, no, actually, none of it made any sense. The transition from this case that never should have been brought by Trump to a sort of wholly unrelated conceptually notion of just giving $1.8 billion to these people, it doesn't make any legal or logical sense. As you say, it is just a giveaway. I would say, I'm more tentative about the prospects for the challenges in the courts, just because, this is so unusual and courts struggle with these things. And, I don't think there should be any uncertainty around this. I think Congress should shut it down as quickly as possible. There should be $0 in this fund. It is a really, really corrupt endeavor, and it is premised on a pack of lies about the 2020 election and the people who illegally tried to overturn that election from Trump, from his officials, all of whom deserve to be investigated and prosecuted. And yes, all the way down to the people who stormed the Capitol, including, yes, sympathetic people like maybe grandmothers who went and committed crimes. I'm sorry, that is how the criminal justice system works.
Right. And you've been a prosecutor, and so it really flies in the face of all of that. Emily, I want to play something here tonight, and it is Memorial Day, and you think about what these holidays mean and how we mark our evolution as a country. Sometimes we hear about 250 years or look back at what the originalist intent was. I want to just show tonight what Donald Trump claimed on January 7th, 21. You don't have to go that far back in the anniversary. He was then claiming that he was against the violence and that these people would pay to the fullest extent of the law. So I'm going to show some of the violence and what he said. Take a look.
Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay.
Something. Emily?
I think it's really important to remember that that was a collective shared moment of horror. There was very little ambiguity about it, very little dissent. You're absolutely right. I think what we've seen since then is how much Trump cares about rewriting this story, because it's become central to his idea about himself as president, that actually he did not try to overturn the election that day, that the people who were there, came in peace, listened to him, were doing something that was helpful to him even. That's really where he's moved. And he's willing to take big political hits to rewrite that history. In some ways, it seems like the most important thing to him, right? This fund is deeply unpopular. Yes, Congress could shut it down, has the leverage to do that. But he's going out on this limb because this idea, this revisionist history, that January 6th was not what you just showed on the screen, but was something entirely different. That's become his story that he wants to rewrite the history books to show, and the fund is a crucial element of that to him.
Ankush?
Yeah, no, I think Emily's exactly right. It is something that he's clearly very, very intently focused on. It remains extremely unpopular. Let's make that clear. Trump's position on January 6th, or what he did surrounding January 6th and 2020 election has consistently polled very badly, including among independents. Of course, it cratered right after January 6th. But even through the Biden administration, among the investigations and cases that were polled and brought throughout that 4-year period, the January 6, 2020 election DOJ case consistently polled higher than the other cases because people were more interested and angry about that. I commissioned some of those polls when I was writing. And so, and Emily's exactly right. Of course, it was day one when Trump issued his pardon of the January 6 defendants. That, too, was very, very unpopular. I think as it related to the defendants who were convicted of violent offenses, the polling showed that 3/4 of the country disapproved of those pardons. And yet he's keeping, he's still going, as Emily is saying. And I think that is the only explanation, that he views it as central to him. He's extremely unpopular right now. This notion, this proposal itself, very, very unpopular. He doesn't seem to care because his principal consideration seems to be providing him with some sense of vindication around the 2020 election. I don't know if he actually thinks he won or not at this point. I mean, it's been so long that he may actually be deluded about it, but it's very, very concerning that this is what takes up so much of his time and energy when the country has real problems. And when, he and his administration told us all last year that they had to slash through the federal government because we have a budget problem, which we really don't.